Hello, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to our global OEM partner community. My name is Rob Ponsonby, and I'm responsible for our OEM partner program as a part of Rockwell Automation's market access organization. I would like to take this moment to welcome you all to this session of our OEM partner webinar series. This series is an ongoing series that focuses on delivering timely information to you, our global OEM partner community, with a focus around best practices, new product launches, new resources available to you as a partner, as well as deep dives into upcoming events and collaboration opportunities. Before we get started on the presentation today, I want to cover just a few pieces of housekeeping. The first is in the bottom right corner of your screen. You can enable closed captioning, and several translations are available. Throughout today's webinar, I encourage you to chat your questions in using the questions and answer feature. Our team will be monitoring the chat and publishing common questions with corresponding answers throughout the event. Additionally, today's webinar is being recorded and will be made available on demand for all of our OEM partners, just like our previous webinar series. Today's agenda will be focusing on two main areas. First is on FactoryTalk Twin Studio, a source for emulation and simulation, and FactoryTalk Optix, our new visualization platform. And with that, I will turn it over to Greg Berger, platform leader for FactoryTalk Design Hub, to introduce us to FactoryTalk Twin Studio. Greg?
Thanks, Rob. So I'm going to be talking about FactoryTalk Twin Studio. Let's see here. Before we start getting into Twin Studio, I'd first like to talk about the FactoryTalk Hub. See if I can get this next slide to switch. Could you advance the next slide for me? Thank you. So FactoryTalk Hub. This is our cloud SaaS platform, and it's divided up into three different segments: design, operate, and maintain. And today we're going to be focusing on the design hub portion of it. Let me back up one there. Sorry about that. Slides went too many times there. So FactoryTalk Design Hub. From this, there are three main things that have been released so far, which is the Design Studio, Optix Studio, and Twin Studio. All three of those will use and leverage FactoryTalk Vault, which is our secured native centralized storage. So think single source of truth, version control. And there's the benefits of SaaS products, which is the increased scalability, be able to reduce capital and maintenance expense. And one other piece that is there as well is the remote access. So for my portion here today, we're going to start off with Twin Studio. And Twin Studio first released at the end of last year, so December 31st, and we brought out a few products with that. So Arena, Studio 5000, Logix Designer, Logix Echo, and Emulate 3D. And we do have more products coming out. We'll get into that a little bit later. But the Twin Studio is a cloud-based platform that allows you to run these existing applications in a SaaS product. So imagine just being able to use a web browser and being able to access and leverage intensive compute resources like Emulate 3D that sometimes will require a graphics card. So here is going to be a little, let's see if it's playing. You should be able to see a little video here of a screen recording that someone did that is actually running on a Mac, and all it requires is a web browser, and then you can get access to any one of these products that we are putting up onto Twin Studio. So being able to access the design tools through a web browser whenever and wherever you like. With FactoryTalk Vault, we then have the ability to collaborate on these models and be able to sync from Twin Studio back into Vault. And in the next slide, I'll show you a demo of that. And part of that is being able to always make sure you're working on the latest version, as well as being able to have a version control system. And then you can use Emulate 3D with Logix Echo to be able to validate and check your changes and do virtual commissioning. And then the benefits of using something like a SaaS product like this is being able to scale your compute resources. So as your team grows, we can leverage a consumption-based model so that way you can scale up and scale down as needed. I'm going to go here next to this demo. So this demo is something that I shot last week. And here I am logging into the FactoryTalk hub.com, and I'm going to be clicking on FactoryTalk Vault. So FactoryTalk Vault here will be made up of your different solutions. And in this particular solution that's going to be coming up loading is a virtual commissioning or emulation model. So I'm going to be clicking on a Logix Echo snapshot, a Emulate 3D model, ACD file, and also a View Designer file, and then opening that with Emulate 3D. Here we have 3 different tiers, and the tiers are just different resources. One of the other things we did last week was we actually released and have a Europe server now as well. So people in Europe will have much better latency. When Twin Studio first opens and you've asked it to open an Emulate 3D file, that's what will automatically load here. And then as that loads, I'm using this drop-down menu on the left-hand side here to start up Echo. And then from there, I'm going to point to those files that I brought in, which is my Echo snapshot. You don't have to use an Echo snapshot. For me, it was just a little quicker than creating it from new from an ACD file and then downloading the ACD file. So once this gets up and running, we will be connecting the Emulate 3D project to this. So that way we can do controls testing. When we first released, we actually didn't have View Designer or FactoryTalk ViewMe runtime, but as of last week, we do now have both of those products in this environment. So that way when you're doing your controls testing, you can also run your HMI. And you can start and stop your machine through your HMI rather than having to toggle bits with your ACD program. So here in the model, we will then use the I/O browser to connect up to the Logix Echo. And once we get connected to the PLC, we can then start to use the HMI to then do a controls test. So then from here, we're going to switch back to the HMI. That little icon there allows you to switch between all your different applications that are running. Now I did speed this part up a little bit so that way we could save some time. So this is sped up, and then we're just doing a reset and a start on the model. And then you can see here on the left-hand side, your Emulate 3D model is running. And then on the right-hand side, you see all your diagnostics through your HMI and your feedback. The next thing that is going to happen here is we are going to save this project. So anytime we open from Vault, we can then save these projects locally in this environment and then press that sync to Vault. It'll detect all the changes in the environment, and then if you choose to, you can sync it back to Vault. When you sync it back to Vault, that'll create a new version, an immutable object that you then have as your latest revision. And here I am back in Vault looking at the history. And you can see all my previous revisions there. And so you can see which one's the latest, who created it, and any notes that they might have included with that. Now that goes for any object or any project file, which can be any file. So Vault does support any file, whether or not you want to upload a PDF, a Word doc, HMIs. All those can be versioned. In this example, we're using Twin Studio to sync it back, but you can also upload files yourself. One of the things we wanted to highlight here is the Vault design tools. So Vault has these built-in analysis that you can click on your different ACD projects, click on analysis, and then you have all this information that we're able to gather and present and show you without having to open Studio 5000. See, the first one we're going to look at here is going to be a routine summary. So what was also released last week was the ability to view logic routines, whether it's ladder logic, structured text, function block, directly from Vault. Also, you can do a compare. So you can compare a previous revision and find out what has changed from that previous version. Now, going back to those design tools, we're going to see down here that we also have this interprocessor communications. So this here will then show you all your produce consumes. You can organize it by produce tags, consume tags, or you can see a view with all or both. This helps when your projects start getting pretty big and being able to see where all the data is coming in and going out. Another thing that we can do is we can look at AOIs and UDTs. And sometimes you'll have AOIs that are nested or UDTs that have other UDTs nested inside. So by clicking on here, you can actually see what makes up your various AOIs or UDTs and see all your nested components. Right. Go to the next slide. There you go. So the next thing I want to talk about is how to get access to Twin Studio. So Twin Studio is going to be a different business model. They do use FactoryTalk Universal Credits, and that doesn't unlock individual products. That actually unlocks the entire Twin Studio platform. So whether or not you want to use Arena or Emulate 3D, they'll just use a different amount of credits per hour. When you use the credits or to apply them, you apply them to an organization, and anybody in that organization that has access will be able to use and consume those credits. Right now, credits are $5 single credit, and they expire 1 year from the date of purchase. So FactoryTalk Twin Studio is the first to use FactoryTalk Universal Credits, but there are other products coming that will be announced probably later this year where we're not the only ones that will be using these credits. The way this consumption model works is whenever you click on these applications and you start it up, it'll start consuming credits. And then when you stop the session, then you will only get charged for the credits that you use. So imagine like a parking meter where you have to put in some coins or credits, and then you only use what's actually there. On the next slide here, we actually have a table. So this table here will show you the amount of credits that are going to be charged for the various applications we have and the tier size. So like the Studio 5000 only has one size, and that's 3 credits an hour, whereas an Emulate 3D small tier will be 6 credits, and a large tier will be 10 credits. One of the things that we have right now, other than being released in Europe, is we have a promotion. So if you go to the FactoryTalk Twin Studio website, you can click on the Try It Now, and then you can put in your information. And we're doing a 50 universal credits free. We just need to enter your details, and then somebody will go and look at and process that. And I think that is all I have for Twin Studio. Were there any questions that I should take?
Thanks, Greg. I'm not seeing any questions coming
Okay.
yet, but just want to remind the audience to please use the Q&A functionality in the Teams live meeting for any questions you have on Twin Studio. And with that, we will move on to Steve Bryant to cover FactoryTalk Optix.
Okay, thank you very much for the opportunity here to present. Greg, thanks for the overview on the hub. I'll try to take control here and see if it works. I'll hit the page down, but I think maybe you're going to have to page for me. That doesn't seem to be working. But so hit the next slide. Next slide, please. So we're introducing FactoryTalk Optix. This slide is just showing you that we're adding it to our portfolio of visualization products. We're really excited about FactoryTalk Optix and its capabilities. And in part of the backstory is that we're adding this to our portfolio because of an acquisition. Next slide, please. So in 2020, we closed on an acquisition with a company called ASEM. Part of their portfolio has a handful of software offerings. One of those was Unico. It's a new HMI product they introduced into the market in 2019. And it was built, intended, designed for not only HMI, but also IoT and Industry 4.0. And its target market was primarily OEMs that were served by ASEM. Next slide. Next build, please. So when we brought this product into our global market, we named it FactoryTalk Optix, in part to cue into some of the things that are different about it, and those things being opened and having options to extend. But also, as the blue indicates at the top, we wanted to keep its IoT focus, its Industry 4.0 application focus, and of course, something that we can put together to serve the OEM market. Next slide, please. So ASEM is located in this eastern Italy, as this beautiful picture shows. And the cool thing about ASEM is they have hardware in addition to the software, and the Unico product is part of their portfolio, but also they have really great mix of options for hardware, for both panels, for industrial PCs, and a lot of capacity there to build out more. As this slide indicates, we think ASEM products are going to be a game changer for what we do for IPCs, closed panels, and also IoT gateways. So if you look at the next slide, please. So I put this together in kind of an overview to show both our ASEM 6300 branding that we brought to market to replace our VersaView product line. Also highlight that part of that capability that ASEM brought to us was remote access. So we introduced FactoryTalk Remote Access in 2021. That came from a product called Ubiquity, and that includes some hardware we branded as Stratix 4300 for remote access routers. We'll dive into that in perhaps some future session, but a lot of the capability that ASEM had been offering to their customers was a package of remote access, hardware, and HMI software. So we're going to focus this session on the HMI software part. Unico was the brand that ASEM took to market, and introducing that in 2019. FactoryTalk Optix is the brand that we are introducing that globally, and we'll be talking about the details or capabilities of FactoryTalk Optix here. Next slide, please. So there is a website. I would encourage you to go take a look at it. It's easy to remember. It's FactoryTalkOptix.com. When you go there, about halfway down, there's some really interesting video. You can play that. Also at the top, there is a Try It Now button, very much like the one Greg just reviewed for Twin Studio. Next slide, please. So things that are interesting and different about FactoryTalk Optix, cued in by those bold text, open, and options, we highlighted here as kind of pillars. So design, kinds of things you can do differently, deployment, once you design your application, how you get it to your runtime, and then what the contents of your application are. We grouped up under graphic options, and then things that you can do to extend this platform in the last column. So these are kind of the four groupings of things you can see about FactoryTalk Optix that are different and new. But this slide isn't going to cover all the things that Optix can do. It is an HMI. It has full features for everything you would expect in an HMI. This is really to highlight in this short bit of time here what's different about Optix. So next page, please, or next slide. So one of the things that we wanted to do with FactoryTalk Optix was focus in on how you design and deliver your applications. And Optix is, like every other HMI, has a studio or editing portion of it. And what we wanted to be able to do was enable everyone to follow the kinds of patterns you're used to. So being able to design locally on a local network with your laptop, with your engineering workstation, a project, and deploy that project, again, connected locally to its runtime target, whether that's an IPC, industrial PC, or a panel. So we created a version of FactoryTalk Optix Studio we call Optix Studio Standard, and we've made that Optix Studio Standard available to you at no charge. And we'll cover this again at the tail end of the presentation here. But the idea is we wanted you to be able to test things from your desktop, build them and deploy them in the way that you normally would do locally. Just a hint here and a little bit of things that are different about FactoryTalk Optix. When you build up project, your content, your rectangles, gauges, lines and boxes, charts, graphs, etc. It's put together or compiled with the runtime, with the modules that it needs to execute. That's all done by FactoryTalk Optix Studio. And again, kind of packaging that up, you can think of FactoryTalk Optix application as a package of both your project and the things it needs to run, gets packaged and sent to the runtime. And that's kind of the transition of 2 to 3 here on this slide. The last piece that we want to talk about here is bullet number 4. And FactoryTalk Optix runtime is kind of the engine that is executing on the platform, on the IPC or the optics panel. That's sort of the ability to run your application, and it can run on closed machines like a panel view type device, or open like an industrial PC. And we have the ability to talk to and communicate with third-party drivers, which is something new that we were able to bring from ASEM into our portfolio as a collection of nice third-party drivers. By third-party, I mean our industrial networks. So we can talk to Siemens, Mitsubishi, Omron, Beckhoff, those kinds of industrial protocols directly from FactoryTalk Optix. So this is kind of the intro of a system of components focused in on what we offer as Studio Standard. And if you go to the next slide, please. We also offer integration with cloud. So when you think about your design and the intro that we walked through with FactoryTalk Design Hub and Twin Studio, FactoryTalk Optix Studio was shown on that slide, kind of positioned there between right next to Twin Studio. And FactoryTalk Optix Studio has an option to also be hosted on a web browser and being edited from a web browser. So if you notice the change on this slide, we added the cloud component, the integration there with our FactoryTalk Design Hub. And really what that means is you can start your designs on cloud, pull them into a web browser, do what you need to do with them from a cloud point of view, all the editing tools you have, connect through remote access and deploy your projects from a web browser directly to your panel or to your runtime. So that's the capability that's in FactoryTalk Optix Studio Pro. In addition, we give you ability to do multi-user collaboration through a version control management system, or systems, plural. We initially released, our initial release supports GitHub. We intend to add more version control providers in the future. The interface to those version control management systems is a universal or open one called Git. And so a lot of version providers support that Git type of API. So we'll be expanding that in the future. Once you get your project built and deployed, very much the same as what I showed you on the previous slide with Optix Studio Standard. It's the same capability really to push or package and push locally. With FactoryTalk Optix Studio Pro, you can package and push that application remotely. So you can be at your house and be deploying to a machine at your shop, or perhaps potentially at a customer facility through our remote access solution. All that's possible, again, brought to you through the FactoryTalk Hub and our FactoryTalk Design environment there, and getting access to and working inside a web browser. So next slide, please. So this slide recaps a little bit of what I said in those 2 slides. We give you options with FactoryTalk Optix to do both web-based design or desktop design, or transition between those postures. We've integrated the collaborative workflows through the multi-user collaboration capability that Pro has, so you can check in your files, save, look at, see who changed what, where it was changed, and then really deploy from any place on the planet that you can connect to a web browser and get your machines connected to the internet. But if you don't have internet, that's not a problem either. We again mentioned that's why we launched with Optix desktop app, and FactoryTalk Optix Studio on your desktop can deploy locally and still follow the same kinds of things that you would do in a disconnected way. And of course, connecting to various devices and being able to deploy to those devices is something that Optix excels at. Next slide, please. So before I move into the deployment options, I wanted to do a quick highlight on this built-in capability to do multi-user and version management. So part of what we wanted to bring to market with FactoryTalk Optix and some of our other tools is the ability to check in version control and manage changes, and really to a highly granular level. It's a little bit hard to see on these slides, but if you zoom in there, built in is the ability to detect if you've changed something as simple as a value in a register, in a tag or a variable, and then really see through the version history what things have changed, and then to be able to manage those changes. So if someone changed something in the field when they were checking something out, and an engineer in the shop changed something, you can compare those two changes and then decide which ones you'd like to be persisted or managed in your official version. So this is all built into FactoryTalk Optix Studio, and this kind of control has been available on the market, but generally requires you to do the work of setting up the version control management system, setting up how the files are integrated, and it's usually done separate from the tool that's actually visualizing and designing, like FactoryTalk Optix Studio. We've taken the step here to integrate those capabilities and those tools in FactoryTalk Optix Studio, as well as FactoryTalk Design Studio, our next generation editor for Logic, so that you have these simplified workflows. They're just built in and part of what you get when you use FactoryTalk Design Hub and our editors. Next slide, please. So once you've got your application designed, your FactoryTalk application is ready to go, it's packaged, where can you run it? So this deployment options slide kind of highlights the capabilities that are new and different about FactoryTalk Optix. We support running on Windows, of course, but also running on Linux. We have the ability to run on small footprint architectures like ARM-based architectures, or more larger architectures like x86 kinds of architectures you find in our IPC family. Optix flexibility, again, allows you to, the way we package our applications allows you to deploy that package to and run on some really unique targets. So you'll see more from us in terms of what those deployed targets look like as bulleted out there for containerized support. That's getting to be something that being requested of us, especially from a lot of our enterprise accounts, and being able to adjust what we manage and run and where we run it. So you'll see more from us there as we continue. One thing again about the target devices of where you run and what you run it on, you see this icon has 4 different or 5 different size panels, and that's kind of something unique about FactoryTalk Optix, the ability to design projects that scale, that you don't need to have a well-known shape of glass potentially when you get started. Of course, this allows you to take the same engineering set of tools, FactoryTalk Optix Studio, and create something that scales from a very small cost application, maybe a very small piece of glass, up to something really large like a supervisory system, maybe a very large panel, or maybe even something that, again, you're thinking about connecting a lot of web clients to, and that's also a capability that Optix has. So just to think about the scale of Optix and the deployment, both in terms of what kinds of hardware, but also what size of glass you have or the size of screen you have, Optix gives you that flexibility to design that with the same set of tools, deploy it to a variety of places and runtime components. And we give you the option per application for you to choose what kind of presentation you want. And that choice includes also having the ability to create HTML5 clients and view those in a web browser. So a lot of flexibility in where you can deploy, a lot of different operating systems, different architectures for the runtime computers, and then different sizes of glass. All that's possible with a single FactoryTalk Optix application. Next page, please. So how that happens, kind of what's in the box behind FactoryTalk Optix that allows it to be able to create a single project and run it on different sizes or shapes of glass, is part of what we call a responsive capability of Optix. And we're showing in this graphic here two different types of controls. This one allows you to keep the shape or the size of an object, in this case the motor, and change the outside parameters of the glass without changing the shape of the motor or size of the motor. We also have other responsive controls that allow you to change the scale with the screen size, and as well various ones for different kinds of layouts like horizontal or vertical layouts. The idea behind all these controls is to, again, give you the ability to create one project, one outcome, and run it at various different sizes of glass, including wide and narrow format types of glass, and even as small as something like a tablet or a phone shown there through a web client. Next slide, please. So in addition, FactoryTalk Optix has a really unique way of showing locales or multi-language support. So we highlight that here just because it's included with what you can do with your project, and where you can take some advantage of how Optix shapes the information that's in your project. And that includes languages, of course, but also locale settings and scaling. So Optix has built-in unit conversion, and it's done per user, per logged in session. So if you have a user that's connecting through one of the web client capabilities, and they log in and say their locale is preferred, perhaps Italian, as this indicates here, they can also have a separate web client connecting with English as a preferred language, and Optix sorts out how to present, how to scale, and what language sets to be able to show to that local user. And some of the underlying details there, it's done by session, so we keep track of where those sessions are coming from, and so we can manage those conversions for you. Again, these are things that help you deliver more value at a lower cost point for your equipment. Next slide, please. So built-in Optix, also different is ordinary things like trending, of course, grid control, but also bar charts, graphs, things that are more dashboard oriented are built into Optix, just a feature that you turn on. We also have reporting. It's kind of a WYSIWYG reporting engine that you see here in this graphic. The content of the report is grid-based today, so you can generate reports at any time for any event and use those kinds of things that you may need for compliance or for confirming that a batch is run correctly or a machine cycle is run correctly. Next slide, please. One of the other components in FactoryTalk Optix that related to graphics is the modern look and feel, and we allow you to bring in SVGs or advanced SVGs and animate those. As you see in some of these snapshots here, the graphics look crisp and modern, more like a web page than traditional HMI. A lot of details behind that we can unpack at a different time, but we are building some things out for you just to accelerate how fast you can move. And some of those would be templates to start your projects with, so you have consistent navigation, look and feel, etc. And we give you also the ability to load a style sheet, so you can switch from one customer or one target customer to another with really just loading a style sheet that lets you shape color and background and radiuses and 100+ different variables, and your whole project will respond to what those style sheets are loading. Next slide, please. We have the ability to bring libraries into the product, and this is packaged in the UI, so you can save things that you want from your project, maybe a master project to share amongst your teammates or amongst colleagues that are working with you. And the inverse is also true. Our end users can create libraries and standards that they would like you to follow as an OEM and share those with you. We use the same mechanism to share as we do to manage a multi-user collaboration environment. So checking in, checking out library content. And also, we brought a lot of content into this product from our FactoryTalk portfolio, specifically our Studio 5000 View Designer graphical objects are listed or that top bullet is indicating are included with FactoryTalk Optix Studio. In the future, we'll be adding more standard libraries from our machine level libraries, our device libraries, motion libraries. So all that content is going to show up in FactoryTalk Optix. We'll have some details for you in subsequent S&C update calls and partner calls to tell you when you can expect those, but it's work in progress right now, and we'll be adding that content to FactoryTalk Optix. Next slide, please. So we've moved kind of past our first three, and we're on the last pillar of extensibility, first three pillars. Extensibility is really deep in FactoryTalk Optix. It has a lot of the IoT connectivity capabilities built in. So the diagram on the right here shows us some MQTT communication happening between a couple of machines and a cloud-hosted version of FactoryTalk Optix. These patterns are what we see as typical when you're trying to solve something of moving data, potentially setting up something where you want to supervise a collection of machines that are executing somewhere. Not only do we support MQTT, but we have REST support built in. And then, of course, for OPC UA communication, as the diagram indicates, you can have built-in machine-to-machine communication. And OPC UA is really key to making sense of a lot of the IoT data that's moved around, including being moved on MQTT. In the middle there is a snapshot kind of showing you our push agent, which is an MQTT store and forward agent, what the sign or the signature of that function is when you drag it into your project. You can see a lot of details there about security and setting up an endpoint or a broker. And then last on this slide is a snapshot of the protocol drivers that we support. And of course, we have preferred connectivity to Rockwell controllers, especially the high performance connections that we have in our other portfolio products we've added to FactoryTalk Optix as well. Next slide, please. So inside of Optix really is an information model, and kind of something that we are used to with our Logix programming. We have types and instances, and they're defined and used to accelerate and maintain the ability to change something at a type and have it propagate to all the instances. FactoryTalk Optix has the exact same kinds of behaviors. And very important, I think, when you're trying to accelerate a design or manage something of it at an object level. And we feel like this is going to be really beneficial for coupling to our Logix controllers in the way that you're used to designing with Logix, but also very important for supporting the standards that you're seeing out in the market with Industry 4.0 and OPC UA companion specifications. So we support those natively. We allow you to import them, work with them, build those kinds of models out. You see in this screen snap here, PackML and Weinsteffen, but there are more, literally hundreds more if you go to the OPC Foundation website. And FactoryTalk Optix supports bringing those in and working with those models. Next slide, please. So last bit of extensibility, FactoryTalk Optix has at its core an information model, as our previous slide indicated, but we expose everything about Optix through a set of APIs. And those APIs are accessible through C#. They're accessible at runtime. When you're running the project, you can do anything literally with Optix at runtime, add components, delete components. The little script that's shown on the right side of here is in one of our demos that you can create faceplates for fans, destroy them all at runtime. You can do things at design time that accelerate or do repetitive processes for you. So if you wanted to write a script, for example, that opened an Excel file, went through that Excel file, found all the types that you're interested in and built out corresponding graphical content, you could do that, automate that through a design time script. And again, these are things about the product at a super high level, enable you to deliver value faster and also to reach requirements that your customers are giving you for IoT kinds of things, for looking at the data that you're moving or being able to define something once and use in a variety of different machine types or model families by adjusting it through a design time script or a runtime script. Next slide, please. So here's a summary of what I've talked through here, giving you kind of a snapshot view of what's different about FactoryTalk Optix and its feature set. I think we've covered everything here, but the intent is just to give you a view of what's different. Remember, there's everything about Optix that you would expect in a visualization platform. And those details, of course, are in our product online help, and certainly you can dig into those as you take a look into Optix. Next slide, please. So I wanted to cover just a quick couple of slides. Next slide. To look at the architectures. Our commercial teams have built a set of reference architectures. This is just a one overview one. They've got some different ones depending on what options, if you're using an Optix panel or an IPC. This one is primarily for an IPC, but the connectivity options that Optix provides is laid out here on this single slide. So the things that we talked about with Optix Studio running locally on your desktop, or if you're running through a web browser, being able to connect through a remote site through the web is on the right side of this. The GitHub integration, Vault integration, the things that you can do with remote access are all pictured here, but also the things you can do with Optix in terms of its options for web clients, HTML5 for reporting, etc. Lot to unpack here, but this slide gives you that big one kind of high-level overview of all the gazintas and gazaltas of what you can do with FactoryTalk Optix. Next slide, please. I wanted to highlight a little bit about what's different about Optix as well. And this is also true of our FactoryTalk Design Hub products. In fact, in general, the benefit of having something SaaS hosted is that you can update it frequently. And we intend to release FactoryTalk Optix frequently, at least once a quarter. We may offer additional releases, maybe minor ones, like we call those hot fixes on this slide. And this slide kind of gives you an overview of our timeline starting last year, releasing FactoryTalk Optix in December. We've done a release in Q1 here with pulling in a couple of things that we needed to do for anomaly fixes and DFS or design for security. We brought in some Italian local language and small UX enhancements. So that's kind of what we would say is a small or hotfix release. A feature release is coming up here this quarter to support Optix panels, and Optix panels are coming out tentatively at the end of June. There's been a lot of communication about that. I'm not going to try to cover that here, but that's a bunch of features that go with our Optix panels and highlighted there. And then, like I said, we intend to do a release every quarter. Starting next quarter, we'll be at kind of pulling in those faceplates I mentioned and do some deeper integration with logics, including syncing in things like engineering units and min and max and those kinds of improvements. So this is just a general pattern for how we intend to work with Optix. We want to keep customer feedback coming, so you see that customer improvements listed on every release, and that'll be part of what we do going forward. Next slide, please. So speaking of Optix panels, I wanted to just give you a quick snapshot of the Optix panels before we jump into some commercial, review a couple of commercial things about Optix. So there are two sizes of panels. They will come pre-packaged or closed, just like our panel view families. So when you get them out of the box, boot them up, they'll run FactoryTalk Optix with a small feature set for the compact and the remote access basic runtime. And then it'll be upgradable from a small to a medium. And the standard one has a little bit bigger engine, a little bit bigger display options, and it comes with a larger package of tokens, medium in this case, and it has Pro as the runtime connection. So these two offerings, again, a lot more details coming out, but these are our first closed or embedded panels that are coming to us from our ASEM acquisition. Behave like panel views that have closed operating system, kind of boots up and starts doing what it's supposed to do as a panel out of the box. Again, just a little bit of these will be upgradable from the shopping cart bags that you see at the bottom, from a small to medium if it's the compact, and from a medium to a large if it's the standard. Next slide, please. So I'm going to hit quickly here a couple slides about commercial summaries. So standard, as I mentioned, is our FactoryTalk Optix Studio standard, available at no charge, downloadable, and runs on your desktop. Pro adds to standard the features that are mentioned here. It's coming from FactoryTalk Hub, and has the web editor running in the cloud, has also the ability to connect to multi-user collaboration or version management, and also the ability to deploy from cloud through FactoryTalk Remote Access. Next slide, please. So FactoryTalk Optix Studio options are sold as subscriptions. Standard is not charged, or not. It's not applicable because we don't charge anything for it. But Studio Pro is around $500 a year subscription, as noted here. Get that through the hub. Can be downloaded after logging in. That's the same for FactoryTalk Optix Studio Standard and FactoryTalk Optix Studio Pro. It's a single download. You can get it from the FactoryTalk Optix tile on the hub. And once you get a subscription for it, it will be attached to a user, to a My Rockwell account user. So essentially, you can use it as many times as you want from as many locations, web browsers, desktop applications, et cetera, because it's associated with you, the user. Next slide, please. So the runtime side, we just covered the studio side, kind of things that you do to edit. The runtime side of FactoryTalk Optix is where you deploy your Optix application. And FactoryTalk Optix runtimes are licensed perpetually. So once you install them, they stay activated. There is a maintenance component of that. And we're offering those, these FactoryTalk Optix runtimes in a variety of sizes with some high granularity. And the idea behind this is to really allow you to size your application based on what you need. So picking features that are important to you. And if you only need a handful of features, 5 digits on your fingers or your hand rather, so if you need 5, that's an extra small. And that graphic on the left kind of indicates maybe a select set of those features. That scales all the way up to our unlimited, where you may have a lot of connectivity that you need, maybe our controllers, but maybe others controllers as well. The kind of solutions that you're going to solve with an unlimited or a large runtime are going to tend to be more line integration or system integration kinds of use cases where you have a lot of connections to a lot of controllers, a lot of databases, a lot of OPC/UA client connections, and potentially a lot of web clients. So you can purchase Optix and size their runtime based on your needs, and that's what we're depicting here in this slide. You can mix and match the capabilities, but one thing you don't have to concern yourself with FactoryTalk Optix is worrying about how many tags you have or how many screens you have. We license Optix by feature. Next slide, please. And just to give you a more detailed under the hood look of those options, right? This is telling you those size packages, telling you how many features are available, and giving you a hint about what those features are. We have a tool available from FactoryTalk Hub on the FactoryTalk Optix page that'll let you kind of do what-if scenarios with your FactoryTalk Optix runtime, or what your FactoryTalk application needs, and size your runtime so you get the right selection for the application you have in mind. Next slide, please. So last I wanted to close with here is just to reiterate the message at the stop. We're adding FactoryTalk Optix to our portfolio. We have already a very deep portfolio with options to run both closed or embedded panels with our PanelView 5000 line or our PanelView Plus line. We certainly have an open PC-based platform with FactoryTalk View SE and FactoryTalk View ME Station. So we're not taking away any of those. We're really adding to our portfolio new capabilities that I've highlighted here in this presentation that are different, unique, and offer value that we feel will be very attractive for you, for the things you're trying to accomplish in your projects, and perhaps even things that your customers are asking you for. And we really are excited about FactoryTalk Optix, excited to bring it to you in the way we are, and to be able to integrate it with our FactoryTalk Design Hub and the capabilities that we're developing there. I think that's the last slide. We can go one more just to see. Yes, all right, go ahead, another slide there. So we have a lot going on in terms of education or enablement. There's more in what we were showing here. If you click on this, we can take you to some of these links. The runtime token calculator I mentioned, the Try It Now, which is shown here in this graphic. And certainly we want to help you get your hands on FactoryTalk Optix and try it out. And we've enabled that through our Try It Now motion, similar to the rest of our Design Hub offerings as well. So I think that's it.
Thank you, Steve. As I mentioned at the beginning of today's call, this webinar will continue on a quarterly cadence. You can see, looking ahead, what we have scheduled. The next session on July 10th will be covering new digital tools, continuing what we've been doing the last 2 sessions, but this one will be specifically focused on Design Studio. Again, these sessions are covering best practices around collaboration with these new tools throughout the design, development, and delivery process of machines and equipment. Looking ahead to September, we'll focus on a deep dive on Automation Fair, both the new format that it will be in this year, as well as unique opportunities that are open to our OEM partner community. Next slide, please. As a reminder, all these sessions and the content are recorded and made available post-call. So please make sure to access the Seismic page where we host all of this material for you. And if you have other teammates that could find this session helpful, please share the registration link with them. And with that, last slide, I'd like to thank you all for coming to this session of the Global OEM Partner webinar series. Avery, please, next slide. Before we break for the call, I want to just remind everyone to please chat in your questions. We didn't see any come in today, but I know these topics are pretty broad and open up a lot of opportunities for our machine builder community. So please make sure to chat in the questions. We'll stay on the call for just a couple of minutes to answer any questions before we close for today. So we look forward to seeing you on our next installment. And to Greg and Steve, thank you so much for your time presenting today. Are there any last points that you'd like to make to our audience?
Nothing from me, just thank you for everybody, and please go out there and do the try now. Love any feedback from the platform. If there's anything that you think we should include to make your life easier using the products, or something's missing that you would really like, please do the submit feedback option that we have available in the FactoryTalk Hub, and we'll be looking at all of that.
Yeah, I agree. I think that encourage folks to try it now. I mean, we put this up there for you guys to get a look at it, get your hands on the product. So let us know. Happy to engage as well.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. We'll stay for questions till the top of the hour. Thank you all.